Hey guys, welcome to my Troy Total War review for PC. Now before we begin, I feel I can say that Troy Total War is a relatively good game. It has some flaws which I'll discuss throughout this review, but it was fun. Playing during a time of myth and gods has always intrigued me ever since I played Age of Mythology in what feels like an eon ago. And with Creative Assembly and their take on this time period, you'll mainly experience the journey of either Hector and his defense of Troy, or of Achilles and, his quest to capture said city. And no, before you ask, you cannot auto-resolve the battle for Troy, and it must be played out, thankfully. There are some other factions here as well, with each side consisting of 4 in total, but usually they have the same role in what they must set out and do. I will dive into this deeper later on though. It should also be noted that Creative Assembly has put a bit of a spin on this time period and swung things to the more side of realism than rather mythical, such as the Minotaur hero unit being an actual man draped in a fairly fiendish attire, rather than, being part man, part bull. This applies to pretty much most of the units in the game. Centaurs are actually very skilled people at shooting a bow off horseback, etc. You get the picture of what I'm trying to say. So if you're someone who isn't a fan of more fantasy Total Wars such as Warhammer, this might actually appeal more to you a little bit. And of course vice versa, if you're someone who actually wanted a Minotaur and not some, scrub human pretending to be one, then you might be a little bit disappointed. But anyway, let's begin the review. So firstly, like we always do here, the graphics. Now I'll throw a comparison up on the screen, but I should mention that for most of this review, the game was actually recorded at medium rather than ultra, due to my recording software not really agreeing with me playing this game at higher graphics. But I did manage to pull off a comparison for you, so I will say this game, like most of the newer Total Wars, looks great for the most part. You have your usual plethora of graphics options to cater to your preferences and machine choices like in other Total Wars. Terrains and fields on the battlefield have always looked relatively nice. You'll see some really bright green fields and rocky grass terrains, some forest maps too. Hell, Total War Troy loves these grassy fields so much that even in naval battles, for some unknown reason, they turn into land battles. It makes no sense, but I'll take it. Province battles also look fine here, with you fighting over relatively little village settlements, and the big city battles are also aesthetically great too. Now, besides these types of battlefields I mentioned, you won't really encounter any more diversity than this, so you could say it's a little lacking in the variety of battlefields, but I was personally satisfied with what I got. Unit design here is also rather well done in my opinion. Now, I'm no ancient Greek historian, so I'm not sure if these suits of armor / weapon designs they've donned here are completely historical, so don't hate me if they aren't, but I'm just saying for the most part they look cool and I sort of like their design. Achilles and Hector themselves also look okay, but I'd much rather a mod that changed them into like Brad Pitt and Eric Bana. That'd just be great. Someone do it. I know that someone will eventually do it, but I'm just kind of waiting for it. The campaign map, for the most part, also looks great. You can see things from what appears to be their romanticized version of Mount Olympus. Cities on the campaign map also look okay. I just wish they had a bit more life to them and changed a bit more over time with their looks. The UI on both the campaign and battle maps also is fitting for the time period, and I didn't really have too much of a problem once I figured out where everything is. Also, animations can be a little janky at times, especially during hero duels, or that animation that plays after a battle has been won or lost. Those could use some improvements. The animations between actual unit collision though does look fine for the most part. If you played Total War before, you should know what they usually look like, with maybe 1 or 2 mishaps here or there, but mostly working. Moving on to the audio now, it too was also fine. Music did feel a little lacking, but they did offer some tracks here and there. Also, the voice acting was also a little lacking in my opinion too. I played my first campaign as Achilles, and the amount of times I've heard Achilles say the same "I'm a living legend" line over and over is pretty much burnt into my brain at this point. I don't know if every general has this problem, but I think I've heard enough Achilles voice lines to last me a lifetime. Battles are also, they sound fine. They suit the time and place and what's happening on the battlefield, such as swords clashing against shields, vice versa, that metal clinging sound. Overall though, audio and graphics were good. Now for the gameplay. Basically, whenever it comes to a Total War game, I usually break it into 4 sections. First, is the AI competent enough to give me a challenge and make the game fun? Second, are there any specific additions to the game exclusively for that game time period or genre? Third, are there enough unit diversity here to keep me invested in doing another run through the game? And finally, fourth, is there anything else that either pleased or annoyed me / got in the way of me having fun, such as bugs or annoying game mechanics, etc, etc? Now firstly, I can safely say, for the most part, the campaign map AI was smart enough to attack me. When I had unguarded settlements, I did find the AI declaring war on me numerous times throughout the game, and it even sent multiple stacks to try and take my cities as well. And this happened mostly throughout the game, even on normal difficulty. Now, there were 1 or 2 occasions where the AI did send in a suicide army with a few units against my garrison and died outright, but like I said, it was mostly competent and it should give you a challenge. The battle AI was also fairly okay too. I did notice a bit more hiccups here along the way, especially in like the province battles, the smaller ones, where it tries to force all its units through the choke point it originally lined up its troops in the pre-battle settings, and then it just commits to this path, even though it could have an easier time just flanking around another path, getting behind me, and it could have won multiple times. However, it never really did this, it just focused on one path and just committed to it. On more open battlefields, I did find it tried to flank a bit more, which was nice, but I'd still like it to do a bit more flanking whenever. As for the battle siege of Troy, like I said before, you cannot auto-resolve it and you have to fight it, thank God. Now, I say fight, or you can just be like me and wait until Poseidon's wrath falls upon the city and devastates Troy into pretty much a heap of ruins before attacking it. Like, why attack the AI in a fair fight in what could be one of the hardest city battles of all time, when you can just mosey right in after Poseidon's done all the work for you? I found it pretty hilarious as well that the game does a pre-sweep with the camera of Troy, but it was already in ruins by the time I got there, so I just thought that was hilarious. Now next, Troy Total War does, to even my surprise, add some new mechanics, specifically for this time period, being the gods / praying mechanic, where you yourself can choose to worship one of these ancient Greek gods such as Zeus or Poseidon and offer up a sacrificial ceremony to please said god. This will result in numerous buffs exclusive to that god, such as when you reach the highest tier of Zeus, you will unlock the Minotaur unit / hero to use in battle. For me personally though, I chose to support Ares and Athena, offering up more buffs to my troops and demoralizing enemy armies. It was great, and I'm glad they at least put in some effort here to add this, because don't forget, this is also one of the saga games in the series, which means they usually treat it as a second tier series, like compared to the more mainline ones like Warhammer or Three Kingdoms. There's also one game mechanic here, for Achilles specifically, being that depending on his mood, you can get buffs that either positively or negatively affect your whole empire and its armies, and it may cost you resources to quench his thirst and soothe his angered soul. Like, to summarize, pretty much Achilles is bipolar, and he can either cause prosperity or destruction based off how he's feeling today. They've also changed how resources work here, where instead of just using gold to purchase units, they've made it into a more diverse system by splitting it up into 5 categories, being food, wood, stone, bronze, and gold. It makes for a more diverse system and gives resources more meaning to them if you use these resources, rather than, just trading them away in like other Total War games. I will say gold in this game is rather inconvenient, in the way a city that's on a gold mine can only mine that deposit for a bit until it runs dry forever, making that city pretty much useless because you can no longer really mine gold. I would like a change here, please change that. Why is gold the only resource that conveniently runs out just to stop you? Also, this game has 2 types of victories. The kill all conquer 100 cities victory, or the more Homeric victory where you must complete certain quests / missions, and upon beating the final one, you will achieve victory. It gives the game a little more life having these choices, and I'm glad it's here. Moving on to the actual troops in this game, I felt the diversity to be rather inconsistent here. And what I mean is, for melee units such as spears and swordsmen, there's far more option for these types when compared to the archer and cavalry units in this game. And yes, I know, it's the Bronze Age, and they're known for not really using archers or cavalry, but I still have to mention it because there is a severe lack here. Like, some races have only access to 1 unit in these classes compared to melee. So yes, I know it's the time period, but it's still really lacking, and anyone who likes having such diversity will be let down. Where this game does shine though is definitely in its melee units. Each race has, I feel, more than enough swordsmen and spearmen units to cover the bases here well, especially Troy's heavy units. I feel they're rather OP. Also, chariots are super OP in this game due to the severe lack of mobility, giving you easier options to outflank and pretty much smash into the enemy lines. Like, I've won countless battles that should be unwinnable thanks to these units. They do try and nerf them a bit by having penalties with certain terrain, such as heavy units get severe movement slows in forests, I believe, I think in tall grass as well, which is a nice addition, making you think a little more about how you want to use these units. The more mythical units, although not really mythical, were diverse enough in my opinion on the battlefield. Maybe try and unlock the centaurs if you want more cavalry options available to you, because that's really your only choices. The heroes were also okay. They felt a bit lacking when compared to, say, Three Kingdoms or Warhammer, and maybe it's because, you know, they've made the dual ability that was in Three Kingdoms an active ability in this game, which only lasts like 45 to 90 seconds. And also that these heroes don't really have the oomph of Warhammer heroes. They're feeling a bit lacking there. On the campaign map, you do have your usual advocate units, spies for assassinating or scouting, priestess which do ceremonies to please the gods, and a sort of diplomat unit that offers more passive bonuses to your empire. There are some unique legendary advocate units such as Medusa, where she can give a major effect to city garrisons or armies' morale before you actually send in an army to fight this, giving you a massive upper hand. I just hate how these legendary / epic advocate units are time limited and they will expire after a certain amount of turns. I wish they just, limited it to just having one on the field, but you could keep it forever. Now finally, for gameplay, was there anything that annoyed me here or pleased me? And yes, this game has some annoyances, mainly in the form of bugs. There are quite a few bugs here that piss me off. Enemy chariots that completely ignored unit detection and just moseyed right through my units, and they could get behind them with ease and just cause my morale to plummet. There was another one, actually it was multiple instances, where Achilles, for some unknown reason, kept falling to his death every time he climbed a ladder up a wall. I mean, come on, in this game, it's clearly not the arrow that takes out Achilles, it's the ladder he tries to climb. Like, I couldn't understand it, why he just fell to his death. There were also some other minor bugs, like, why the hell does this next tier of buff make Achilles lose stats instead of gaining them? Like, I don't understand. Like, I could not for the life of me figure this out. And there were also some more other minor bugs, such as the AI doing dumb things like I talked about before, where it sent in the smaller armies to die against your garrison. There were just some little tidbit bugs here and there. It makes no sense and these bugs need to be fixed. Also, I feel that the campaign map is a bit small and the faction roster here is lacking the selection. Yes, it's a saga game, they say, but just because you slap the word saga in the title isn't going to suddenly make me say, oh, I forgive it for its lack of content compared to predecessor games like Three Kingdoms or Warhammer. Also, the game currently isn't out on Steam, I believe, which, if that's a turn off for you, there's that. However, Creative Assembly did give away the game for free on Epic Store within the first 24 hours of release, which isn't available now, mind you, it's been more than 24 hours, but I thought I'd just mention it, just because it's a little buff. Anyway, I think that just about covers it for Troy Total War, so it's time for a final score. So, the final score for Troy Total War is a 7 out of 10. It's a good game. The graphics are good, and some of the best in the series, if you want to say. Sounds and audio are also fine. The AI for the most part was acceptable, and changes to how resources were used here is a good change in my opinion. The bipolar Achilles and the god worshipping mechanic also kept me interested, and having these quests to do throughout the game gave it a bit more life and replayability. So that was also a nice addition. Its negatives are that it's buggy, rather lacking in an overall troop diversity like I mentioned before, a smaller starting roster of factions, and the map feels slightly smaller than other Total War games, but that's just me. And there are also some other minor problems I mentioned throughout this review, but I won't be going over all of them. But this all brings it to a 7 out of 10 for me. But once again, it's a good game, and if you're looking to satisfy that itch for some ancient Greek gameplay, then Troy here should have you covered. Anyway guys, what did you think? Did you like or dislike Troy Total War? Tell me below, and thanks as always.